All right, Amazon.
Layoffs at Amazon, possibly cutting 10,000 workers starting as soon as this week. Chief Business Correspondent Rebecca Jarvis is here with more. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning to you, Robin. And these are deep cuts. Tech giant Amazon.
Oh, by the way, Decision Desk headquarters projects Republicans have won a majority in the U.S. House of Representatives with at least 218 seats. Final count pending calls in 14 outstanding races. Republicans have flipped the House and now control it.
Amazon planning to cut 10,000 employees starting this week, according to the New York Times. And this is the largest layoff in the company's nearly 30-year history. It's also something we've now been hearing from so many tech companies, including Facebook parent company Meta, Lyft.
They're not firing fucking people working in the factories and distribution facilities. They're firing people working on the tech side. Don't be crazy now. Right before fucking Black Friday, you think Amazon's going to cut distribution facilities? No, those essential workers that don't get essential pay are unironically the fucking bottom line. They are the people who are making Amazon what it is, the behemoth that it is. You think they're going to be cutting fucking delivery people? You think they're going to be cutting the facilities people? No, they're going to be fucking cutting tech people. Tech bubble is popping off. The tech bubble was in many ways propped up by decades of quantitative easing and basically free money that the government was printing over and over again. And the first sign of that no longer happening, like a little bit of fucking increase in interest rates, and holy fuck, the tech bubble is like, oh shit, what the fuck? We no longer have permanent growth. Shit's about to explode. But they told me to learn the code. Yeah, I mean, we have said this for a very long time. The learn the code mentality, the hyper focus on STEM lords, like coders being like the most important job that you could get. Everyone should learn a fucking new language. All the shit was specifically campaigning at the behest of the neo-tech serfdoms, the neo-feudalist tech serfdoms that were inevitably going to lower the benefits and overall, like, you know, compensation for the tech industry so that you could have more people that you can exploit, make it more competitive. Facebook is laying off 11,000 workers. Amazon is laying off 10,000 workers. Twitter laid off 3,700 workers, half its workforce. Stripe laid off 1,100. Shopify 1,000. Lyft 700. This is why tech workers need to unionize. And then this guy goes, so a company can go bankrupt and lay off 100% of its workers? Yeah, that's. I mean, these companies are bankrupt. They're just being kept afloat currently. Anyway.
And Twitter post Musk's takeover. So what's really going on here? Well, many of these big companies, these tech companies, they built up their workforces during the pandemic. And as Americans and people all over the world were stuck at home, spending more time than ever before on their phones and buying stuff on Amazon. But then inflation came along with the economy reopening, and people shifted their time and their money from buying stuff to spending on going.
I just don't understand why people thought that, like, the COVID level growth was going to stay steady. Or I guess they knew that it wasn't going to, and this will yield good results for companies because ultimately it will seem like they are eliminating redundancies. Remember, there is no better indication of like the stock market not necessarily representing the economy and the health of the economy than companies laying off thousands of workers and then their stock prices going up because they have become more efficient.
Out. And the question now is, with these deep cuts in tech, what might be the spillover effect on the larger economy? Michael, we still have 3.7% unemployment. That is historically low. But as you see people lose their jobs in tech and they spend less money in the economy, that can happen and impact other areas as well, Michael.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty out there. Rebecca, thank you so much. Hi, everyone.
Called quarter by quarter fog of war brain. People plan for the quarter and not really anything beyond that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Companies overpromise positions because it's that goofy capitalism brain that want to grow, but the moment that things take a downturn, they blame the amount of workers for impacting the bottom line. It's always the little person that feels the effect the most. Plus, with 3.7% unemployment, you can literally fucking get back to a situation where you're hiring fresh college graduates or forcing the current workforce that you have to do the job of all the people that just got fired. Whenever people talk about efficiency or eliminating redundancy, what they mean is the people that are in that workforce are now going to do, they're not going to do the job of 2 people, 3 people, because they're going to be forced to, because what's the alternative? You get fired. You have no protection. These massive companies still have lots of money. It's not a money problem. They could pay you if they wanted to. It might be useful to learn about why they don't want to pay people right now. It's not going to solve any problems or make you feel better, but knowing how things actually work. By high inflation, the economy isn't that bad yet. The stock market overall is not doing great, but not that bad yet. But tech stocks in particular are getting absolutely hammered. They're losing 60%, 70%, 80% of their value this year. Tech stocks have been hugely overvalued for a decade now. Times were good and money was cheap. So rich people stuck all their money into tech because it kept going up until it didn't. Smart people expected a correction eventually, but it's much worse than anticipated. So tech stocks are way down. How does this impact executives at these companies? As public companies, their fiscal responsibility is to their shareholders and their board. They have to stop the bleeding. If they don't, they can be fired. Everybody has a boss. This is where it starts to begin to impact you. At most companies, paying humans is by far the biggest line item expense in the expense budget. Layoffs are by far the easiest and most expedient way for a company to cut expenses. As long as that is true, layoffs will happen in a downturn. You can also correct it with temp labor. You can also correct it by telling the existing employees that weren't fired to do the job of all the people that just were. Okay. The only other thing I want to address is the narrative that these companies overhired in a way that was irresponsible. I think there is a lot of nuance lost when we talk about it this way. The people who had those jobs appreciated them while they existed. If you ask someone who got a dream job at Meta whether they would have preferred not to get that job so the company could be more responsible, they would tell you to fuck off. That's not how things work. Like when we talk about productivity, for example, as many do, we talk about productivity. What we are simply talking about is how technological advancements have made it so that one worker can do the job of 10, but not necessarily get, like, you can create value that is like 10 people, okay? You can create value like you're 10 people, but you're not going to get paid the 10 people's value. You're going to get paid. You're not going to have less hours as a consequence of that. But the company is now making 10 people value from you, the one person. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. The thing I would like to see is helping people understand better how much volatility is in their role. Are they likely to be cut if things get tight? Good video showing the similarities.
You want to know the truth? I don't know enough about the...
Ooh, this seems like a good video. Good video showing the similarities from the dot-com bubble of 2000 to the 2022 buzz.
Is it a boom without end?
And I should, being a tech company CEO. And I'm 32 years old now. I was 12 years old at the turn of the millennium. I should know about this stuff. But back then, all I cared about was my N64.
I gotta pee, I'll be back.
What I know
but this
about
seems
the
like a great video
was that it was this massive overhype in the stock market in the 2000s, which led to a massive market crash around that year. And I can remember some keywords like Amazon and eBay. They were all part of that.
There's no guarantee that Amazon.com can be a successful company. What we're trying to do is very complicated.
If it wasn't the year 2000, it must have been related to Y2K, right?
You will have to look out for you, your neighbors, and your community. Even the government's best efforts may not be enough.
But I don't know. So we're doing this video for my own research and because you guys asked for it. truly get a grip on what happened, we kind of need to draw a timeline that starts in the early 90s. And the first key moment in that timeline is the release of a web browser called Mosaic. It was released in January 1993, and it was key to making the internet popular. Mind you, the internet existed before then. The internet as a network of interconnected computers, it existed. And other browsers like World Wide Web or Viola, www, they existed before then, but it was Mosaic that helped bring wide access to the web. It was developed by the National Center for Supercomputer Applications, and the credit on that goes for two developers, Eric Bina and Mark Andreessen. Yes, that Mark Andreessen. They both later went on to found Netscape and released the Netscape Navigator in December 94. Mark Andreessen is, of course, one of the co-founders of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most important venture capital firms today, a firm that has invested in Skype and Twitter and Facebook and Groupon, Zynga, BuzzFeed, Medium, Figma. But I'm getting sidetracked.
What the fuck is Figma, dude? Figma balls.
The thing is that Mosaic was the first popular internet browser in the world. We could call it the beginning of a widely accessible internet. And other browsers came along later and stole most of its market share. And there were literally browser wars in the 90s.
Mark Andreessen has brought rhyme, reason, and maybe soon the masses to the mystifying world of the internet, which seamlessly links computers all over the world.
Let's fill this timeline with internet speeds. In 1993, the fastest internet you could get was 56 kilobytes per second. That was with a modem over the phone. Now, for you younglings watching, this sound was the sound of the future. That's the sound of your computer
God
connecting to the
damn.
internet, accessing the web through your phone. That's until somebody at your household.
Yo, I'm so fucking old. I know, like, I've seen that shit, dude.
Kind of
I've
picks up
seen
the
some of
handset.
those graphics, brother.
At all. But take a look at this. Even at the turn of the millennium, the fastest internet that you could get was 256K. If you look at this curious thing, you know, when Amazon.com released, the average internet for US households was 56 kilobytes per second.
That shit would take hours to fucking load, man.
And let's add computer access to that timeline. Households in the US with a personal computer went from 8% in 1984 to 36% in 97 to 51%.
You know what's fucking pathetic, by the way? 256 kilobytes, dude. Like, in America, ain't shit changed, brother. What the fuck? How sad is it that, like, in most places in America, you, like, because he's going to talk about, like, crazy speeds now. He's going to be like, oh, man, you can just, like, very easily access, like, 1 gig, right? No. Wrong.
In the year 2000. But even in this early internet, entrepreneurs saw a field of opportunity. Let's add, for example, the number of websites. From 91 to 95, the number of uploaded websites went from 1 to 23,000 plus, and there were no signs of slowing down. From 95 to 96, it jumped 1,000% to 257,000 websites uploaded. These factors, along with a few others, like the launch of Yahoo, led people to start seeing the internet as this gold mine. To me, it's crazy to think that I was alive for this fundamental transformation in our lifetimes, but I was just worried about other things. The point was that in these 5 years or so, the internet stopped being a world exclusive for geeks in dark, stuffy basements. There was a lot of hype surrounding internet companies. Here's another fundamental episode in this.
Remember the 30-second porn clips on XNXX, the original TikTok? Bro, I remember using, like some fucking Nokia phone, okay, that had internet access for the first time, and it had, like, color, and trying to look up porn on it with my SIM card that was not unlimited, by the way. There was no such thing as, like, unlimited data back then, and I tried to fucking, like, jerk off to titty pics on a fucking screen this big, you know what I mean? How crazy is that shit?
Story. In August 95, Netscape went public, and the world was completely blown away.
I had a PSP too. That kind of was a game changer, but, like, that's, we're talking, at that point, we're talking, like, LimeWire, you know, Ares was another one, FrostWire, like, you got peer-to-peer sharing. You know, at that point, you were downloading all kinds of fucking viruses on the family computer to just get one, to fire one off on the fucking PSP in your room.
Going public means a company's shares, which were previously owned by the founders and by private investors, can now be traded by the public in the public stock market. Companies define an IPO price, that's the initial public offering price, or the price per share they expect people will pay at that initial offering. And the point was that Netscape went public at $28 per share. By the end of the day, the price per share had almost tripled to $75 and ended up closing at $58. And now let's remember that Netscape was founded by these guys less than 18 months prior to that. Their valuation went from $0 to $2.9 billion in about a year. This insane soar for Netscape suddenly meant that anything and everything with a .com in its name was a golden ticket to millions of dollars. The web promised new fortunes, and like cowboys driving into the new frontier, investors rushed to inject money into these companies. But there was no restraint. These companies needed to grow as fast as possible to have more and more users. So many companies just invested mostly in advertising.
It all together with the true power of the internet.
It didn't really matter that many of these companies weren't profitable at all. All that mattered was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In 1999, for example, there were 457 IPOs, and many of them .com companies. And those IPOs were very successful that year. Just to give you a reference, in '96, IPOs yielded an average of 17% in their first day returns. This percentage increased to 58% for non-internet companies in '99. But for .coms, the returns were a stunning 89%. 117 .com companies doubled their price in the first day of trading. In total, from 95 to 2001, 439 .com companies raised $34 billion in capital. This got mixed up with a bunch of other variables. In the late 90s, US's interest rates were at their lowest since the 70s. The government had lowered tax rates on capital gains from 28% to 20%. This meant that investing in bonds, for example, was boring.
And if banking was boring, then the bond department at the bank was straight up comatose.
On the contrary, investors were now motivated to favor low to no.
I mean, dude, this alongside Glass-Steagall, I mean, how could anything go wrong, you know? Burn, baby, burn.
No dividend-paying stocks over those that paid considerable dividends. For reference on that, a company may decide to pay dividends to its shareholders if it has leftover profits, if the revenue exceeds its expenses, right? So dividends are distributed equally and usually range from a few cents to a few dollars per share.
A couple of key headline numbers. Revenue, $89 billion, just under.
For investors, however, it was just better tax-wise to invest in stocks that gained a lot of value on paper on the stock market and that didn't necessarily pay dividends. And these .com startups were spending like crazy. Profitability was not on the horizon, and it didn't matter. They just didn't want to turn a profit. They just wanted world domination. And if that sounds strangely...
That's crazy. It seems like we learned a lot from the .com bubble, and we learned to just do the exact same thing. It's like monopolizing quickly, being the first to monopolize.
Familiar is because it is.
The last time you put out a note on Tesla, I think
all they are this one stock.
This is a manifestation of a bubble.
But let's get back to the 90s. In the mix of all this, the crazy spending, one person thought differently, and that's Alan Greenspan, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve back then. He warned that this spending was just too exuberant. But this warning itself is a topic of debate. In retrospect, some experts have said that, yes, Greenspan did warn of this erratic behavior, but did little to correct it. Still, Greenspan's warning reached deaf ears. If you go back then, what you'd see would be an illusion, high hopes, and lots of partying. They don't say let's party like it's 1999 for no reason. And a lot of it was fueled by an endless loop of hype. Hearsay spread like a virus, motivating more and more investors to get into the mix, amateurs and professionals alike. Think of it as a toxic positivity that would vastly damage the economy. And once again, this sounds too familiar. It wasn't all speculation, though. Companies like Amazon and eBay were born in the 90s, and they not only showed promise, but were successful business models. The detail here is that there was only room in the world and in the economy for one Amazon and one eBay. The reality was that most .coms weren't meant for success. And some examples, just for research sake, and just to give you an idea, there's this company called Boo.com, who was an online clothing retailer that ended up spending $188 million in 6 months. And there was this company called Pixelon, that's a streaming video startup that hosted a $16 million .com party in October '99 that had bands like Kiss, Sugar Ray, and a reunion of The Who. And you're probably too young to understand who The Who is. Get it? Anyway, the point was that there was inevitable FOMO involved in all of this. Such a return was just too much to pass up, but at the same time, it became the perfect storm. And by now, it's just about to blow.
Have technology, globalization, and free trade come together to create a truly new economy. We hope that the roaring 90s will stretch on after the ball drops.
And when you look past the hype at the end of it all, a company must generate cash and produce a profit eventually. It's that simple. But when you're high, it's just hard to see that reality. These companies...
I want to ask about the Glass-Steagall Act, or repealing Glass-Steagall Act, which is pretty basic. It's not out of my element. The easiest thing you can understand is, here, I'll tell you like this. Bank of America. Now, Bank of America Merrill Lynch. That's it. Back in the day, commercial banks that take your money, okay, and hold it, and investment banks were separate. That's no longer the case in the world that you live in. That's it.
Were spending crazy dollars on marketing and aspects that had nothing to do with generating revenue or improving their cash flow. If they can continue raising money, why would you want to focus on revenue, right?
Why Musk was so determined to tell the street that he wasn't going to raise capital.
It's been growing at a remarkable pace.
Apple will be the first trillion-dollar company.
Part of the problem was that the expectations created by these massive investment rounds, these massive valuations and IPOs, was so much expectation that the value of these companies exceeded their capacity to respond. The promised value was just too much for the companies to actually grow to that value. HSBC once reported that companies would have to grow their revenue by 80% a year to satisfy valuations they had back in those years. Microsoft was one of the best performing companies at that time, and it only managed to grow by 50%. On March 2000, the NASDAQ index reached an all-time high of 5,132 points, but the needles that would prick the bubble were just creeping in. And hold on, we've made it all the way to year 2000, and we have not talked about Y2K.
What if everything that could go wrong did?
100 days away, after all the talk, all the hype, all the fear.
You children of the millennium, you probably won't get why there was so much desperation and craziness around Y2K, because the theoretical problem was that computers in the past century often counted years with just 2 digits, 88, 95. This wasn't programmers being lazy. On the contrary, it was these guys optimizing for the very limited storage at the time. Any additional bit required to store a full year was very expensive. So when the computer clock changed in the millennia, it would go to 00. But how was 2000 different from 1900? They're both 00. Another problem back then was that some programmers may have misunderstood the Gregorian calendar rule on leap years. The rule states that years that are exactly divisible by 100 are not leap years. While that rule is correct, there's an exception to it that states that years divisible by 400 are leap years. And then 2000, the correct answer is 2000 was a leap year. And finally, there was fear that people could confuse the day, month, year format on the date. When you have a 99 at the end, it's easy to tell which one of those numbers is the year. But what if the date is 01/11/05? Which is which? This, by the way, would be much simpler if everyone just adhered to the very logical day, month, year.
I I will stand by this. I'm sorry to state this. This is the one thing America got right. Everything else, not using the metric system, gigantic L. Not using centigrade, gigantic L. This is the one thing America got right and the rest of the fucking world got wrong. Straight up. And I say this as someone who comes from the date, month, year, like day, month, year system. It makes so much more sense. I have not lost it. I'm so right.
Here rather than just mixing them up pointlessly. But anyway, there was fear. There was widespread fear that the world would.
Everybody knows what the year is. So the increments smallest to largest is stupid. Everybody already knows what year it fucking is for the most part. You look at that last. It's like, I see it as like a folder. Month is the larger folder, and the day within that month should come afterwards. That's how I think about it. Straight up. It's the one thing that America got right. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense in my brain. And I say that as someone who quite literally started with day, month, year. I think what month it is needs to come before the day. Straight up.
Would collapse.
Literally trigger the end of the world. Power, water, telecommunication.
Tomorrow, what happens to you and the computers in your home and business? The answer is not when you.
Your bank accounts could be locked because technically, for their computer, you weren't born yet. The US Secretary of Defense said that the Y2K problem is the electronic equivalent of El Nino, and there would be nasty surprises around the globe. Companies like AT&T revealed that 60% of the time and money needed for its total compliance efforts was going to be devoted to testing the source code changes made to address this Y2K issue. And I kid you not, I remember having conversations with my friends in school on whether the world was going to end on that December vacation. The US had braced the country for the financial chaos that Y2K would cause. In February 2000, when it was clear that we had survived, Alan Greenspan announced the need for a dramatic rise in interest rates. As soon as he mentioned that increment in interest, speculation grew rampant, as it was really unclear how the higher borrowing costs and the increased rates would affect these inflated dot-com stocks.
It lost a quarter of its value in just 1 week. These things are going down. Some have lost up to half their value already.
And then came another big hit. Just 3 days after the Nasdaq had hit an all-time high, Japan announced that it had entered into a recession. From October to December of '99, the Asian country had seen the third largest quarterly decline since World War II. And Japan is important here because they were a crucial player in the tech market. So this news spread like wildfire, starting a worldwide sell-off of already very vulnerable stocks. In no time, the Nasdaq had fallen 39% in the year 2000.
It's described as nothing short of breathtaking points drop never before seen on the US market.
This drop just showed the fragility of internet stocks as the market suffered significant losses while other markets and other industries rose. By March 13th of 2000, the Nasdaq had seen its fourth biggest point loss in history. And we were just getting started with that crash. On March 20th, like a swift sword slaying any remaining hope, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates. But add another punch to the market. Microsoft was facing an antitrust lawsuit by the US government, just like the one Facebook is facing right now. Go watch that video. At the time, Microsoft was said to have created a monopoly using the legal and technical restrictions it put on the ability
how time has changed.
Of PC manufacturers and users to uninstall their browser Internet Explorer and to use other programs.
I think it's fucking hilarious that like Microsoft still, like remnants of that still exist within Microsoft's endless begging for you to just keep using Internet Explorer. Or now, have you tried Edge? Come on, please try the Edge. Please, dude, please try Edge. Please. I know you want to make your default browser Google Chrome, but have you thought about Microsoft Edge? Oh my God, I'm gonna kill myself, dude. Please try Edge, dude. I'm fucking edging, man. I'm on a knife's edge. Come on.
Programs such as Netscape and Java.
In a sense, this is the end of an era.
A failed early settlement of the case hit Microsoft with 15% in losses and an 8% drop in the NASDAQ. And it was then and only then that investors, analysts, and experts all raised flags. To them, it was finally time to look at the numbers. But it was just too late. There simply was no more money. All the hype was gone. All those promises of overnight millionaires disappeared when hit after hit reminded the world that a bubble might be a perfect sphere, but can also burst very easily.
The stock market plummeted, triggering frantic selling.
The year 2000 turned into a roller coaster. Tech companies were failing and failing fast. By November of that year, they had lost $1.75 trillion in value. In that year alone, 22,000 people had lost their jobs in the dot-com world. All those overvalued dot-com companies lost 75% of their value in a matter of months.
The company announced today it's laying off 518 people.
Unfortunately, 2001 was not a kind year. Several major accounting scandals like Enron only helped in worsening the crisis. By October 2002, NASDAQ had lost 78% of its peak value and returned to 1,114 points, which were 1995 levels. 5 years of hype, speculation, advertising, and dreams just disappeared in 14 months. And the consequences are still present, for better or for worse. The dot-com bubble dried up into a desert. The species that relied on outside money was dying, starved on their food. Investors became more cautious, and many promising companies just ceased to exist.
It's a question now being debated in classrooms, in boardrooms, and here on Wall Street.
But some survived, of course, with names that you might remember, like Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Apple. In fact, those that survived saw that in these harsh conditions, they had an advantage. Real estate was cheap, labor was plenty, and even less expensive than before, and the competition suddenly became limited.
George Bush saw all this and was like, yeah, I'm going to have to do a 9/11 now. Just a little bit of a 9/11. 9/11. September 11.
And that's not to say that they weren't immune to this crisis. Their stocks did plummet. Amazon, for example, went from $107 to $7. Apple went from $5 to under $1. And some might say that they survived the crisis so they could be examples, and they are. First of all, they had a solid business model, and they had brilliant people at to help. We're not saying others were dumb, by the way, but focusing on these companies doesn't answer questions such as what happened and who was.
You mean 11/9? Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Classic. I'm sorry. How could I have forgotten? 11/9. Oh, wait, we don't know. Oh, it's not 11/9. It's 9/11. That's so funny. That's interesting.
Was to blame. Analyst Quinn Mills wrote on Harvard Business Review that we shouldn't blame the dot-com companies themselves. In fact, it's the total opposite. To him and to many, the real culprit of this was the capital markets. In his words, venture capitalists bear a marked responsibility for the dot-com disaster, as do investment banks and brokerage houses that hyped these dot-com shares. Just as the capital markets helped in injecting cash into this growing world, they also mishandled it, fueled by greed and desire to expand and grasp everybody in their hand.
Europeans be like, 11/9, you mean? Right? 11/9, you mean? The 11th of September in 2001, at the top of the hour, there was a 60-second ad break. Right? Yes, that's right. A second ad break has hit the Twitch watchers of the HasanAbi broadcast. At the top of the hour, there's a 60-second ad break. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe. You can do that for $5, or you can do that for free with a Twitch Prime. You can get a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. You get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me. You can also get gifted a sub, if you will. You can also get gifted a sub. Here's the 1-minute ad break now. Very nice.
Hands, but they left their business models behind. Quinn reminds us of other culprits too. The powerful and sometimes dangerous alliance between Wall Street and the Federal Reserve created a lot of money, too much money it might seem. Part of it was to prepare for an apocalyptic phenomenon that never really occurred. But the consequences of this crisis were so vast that many wondered if the world would ever recover from this bubble. It sounds irrational now because we've seen that the tech world has indeed regained all of its strength. And that, of course, brings us to today. Who here had a parachute for 2020? Even with a health crisis, 2020 was the busiest year for IPOs in a very long time. The last time it was this alive, it was 2001. Tulips.com's real estate, we've been there before. So what do you think? Is it just a matter of when until we see another bubble burst? Are you still watching? That's a
I wish he made more comparisons. I mean, he just like described the .com bubble.